I'm going to be reacting to a video by Skeptic in which he tells us why he's no longer vegan. This is pretty much old news at this point, but the message is eternal, so I'm going to say what needs to be said anyway.
And so I'm in a bit of an awkward situation here in that, I feel I want to explain some of the problems that I was facing in maintaining a healthy plant-based diet, but I want to clarify that shouldn't be informing your position on the viability of a plant-based diet for yourself. A lot of people have been sending me studies, in particular the American Dietetic Association study that being vegan is healthy at all stages of life, including pregnancy, as if this is new information to me. Yeah, as if this isn't something that I was already aware of and wasn't citing myself. Of course, the American Dietetic Association says that a well-planned vegan diet is healthful at all stages of life. The key point is well planned there, and my problem is not with the idea that every nutrient that's required to be healthy can be found in a plant-based diet. I think that it can. My problem is with the practicability of maintaining it for myself.
There are a number of reasons why I don't find the ADA or the paper commonly cited that states their position compelling. There are two individuals whose names prominently appear on that paper, and both of them are plant-based ideologues. So my first red flag is the conflict of interest. Second, just taking a look at the abstract, it introduces appropriately planned vegetarian diets, plural, as being healthful and nutritionally adequate, and later it says appropriate for individuals during all stages of the life cycle. It includes a vegan diet among such diets. However, later, it defines a vegetarian diet as one that does not include meat, including fowl, or seafood, or products containing those foods. The reasonable assumption is that this is what I'm supposed to think vegetarian diet means when I see it again in the abstract. However, meat, including fowl, and seafood are not the entirety of the foods found in the animal kingdom, which, last I checked, vegan diets expressly forbid. So, even based on the abstract of this off-cited opinion piece, I can't feel comfortable assuming that what they say about vegetarian diets is also true for vegan diets. Putting that aside, let's just focus on the purpose of the video, which is for him to explain why it's not practicable for him to eat vegan. The main gripe I have with this, by the way, is how he says it shouldn't inform anyone else. We're going to get into that later.
I also want to clarify that I really don't know what my diet's going to look like going forwards. I don't know if I'll continue to eat these foods or whether I'll be able to abandon them again in the future. I really don't know. So I'm not trying to do an ex-vegan, anti-vegan thing. I'm not trying to come out and say, veganism did this to me, I had a horrible experience, and this is why you shouldn't be vegan. Like, I still want to encourage people to be vegan. I still want to encourage people, of course, to care about animal suffering and to help bring about the end of factory farming.
So he plans to continue to try to convince people to try a diet that was difficult for him to maintain for apparently personal reasons, because he says it shouldn't really inform anyone else. These reasons must be very individual and very personal, not at all something millions of people on the planet are suffering with as we speak.
Now, for most of my life, I've had a particular set of health issues, just like most people have some health issues, that I must stress are unrelated to veganism. They're not caused by veganism. I had them before I was vegan. It's nothing like that.
You know how sometimes somebody repeats something over and over to themselves, almost as though they're trying to convince themselves of a lie?
But for instance, one of the most important or relevant here is IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome, which people have to varying degrees. I've suffered with it quite severely for most of my life.
Okay, let's just stop here for a second and check out some statistics. Is this paper trustworthy enough? I think 11% is a rather conservative number. 11% of 8 billion is how many people exactly? But this is a super personal problem I'm having, you guys, and I don't want you to think that just because you probably have IBS that you can't manage to maintain a vegan diet, even though a properly planned whole foods vegan diet causes and exacerbates the problems of IBS. But it's not the fault of the vegan diet, you guys. Oh wait, he actually never said anything about a vegan diet. He said veganism. Is that the out he's looking for here? Because veganism by itself doesn't do a goddamn thing? Forcing yourself to adhere to dietary restrictions that prevent you from eating the best, most healthful foods and regulates you to only eat foods that cause disruption in the human body, all for an ideology. Then going on the internet pretending that the dietary patterns you forced yourself into are somehow not responsible for you feeling as terrible as you do, and then trying to convince other people to subject themselves to the same thing that you subjected yourself to, even though you no longer plan to subject yourself to that, is some of the most misanthropic shit ever. You're right, Alex. Maybe it's not veganism. It's you. You're a 1,000-year douche for that. Let's continue listening, shall we?
It's not been as bad as I've been getting older, but it essentially translates to having some severe stomach problems, as well as, I don't really know how to put it, but you need to make sure you have access to a toilet. For most of my childhood, one of the great miseries of my life was that I essentially wouldn't be able to go anywhere that didn't have an immediate toilet access, because otherwise I'd be absolutely stuck out. And the anxiety of just being there and knowing that that was the case would be enough to bring on the symptoms of IBS. And I'd just be paralyzed by it. This was livable. That is an important thing to stress. It's not like the pain that I experience when I suffer from these symptoms is completely and utterly debilitating. As I say, as long as I'm in a situation where I can deal with it, as long as I have a toilet nearby, as long as I don't need to be doing something important. But the problem is that, of course, when there was something I needed to be doing, so if I was giving a talk or a debate, or even if I was attending a lecture or a debate or something like that, or indeed if I was just hanging out with friends in a place that didn't have a toilet access, if we were just going for a picnic or like hanging out by the river or something, I knew that if I was going to eat something and then go to these things, there was a good chance that I was going to run into quite a bit of trouble.
Maybe it's because I lived that way for decades. Maybe it's because I grew up in a household with other women who also suffered with this. Maybe that's why I think it's common knowledge at this point. Maybe he's talking to people who've never met a person with IBS or who've never experienced symptoms of IBS, who have never even heard of it. I hope it's eye-opening for you. And now, as someone who has shifted their eating pattern from being plant-based to being meat-based, I can safely say that eating animal products does not exacerbate or cause symptoms of IBS in me. On occasion, I'll incorporate something or I have something that I quote-unquote know I shouldn't have, and those symptoms come back. I feel like I can safely say those plant-based products cause it. When I first watched this video, I think I kind of sympathized with him, even though I thought he was being a twat for not being more honest or logical. It's hard not to because I lived through that myself and I know how miserable it is. Is it lethal? No, but it's not thriving. So why try to motivate or push people to experience the same thing?
Now, this clearly isn't ideal, right? Like, this isn't a particularly healthy way to live, but it was essentially a choice between that or just turning down all of these opportunities and not doing any of these things. I'm well aware of the fact that every nutrient we need to be healthy can be found on an adequately planned vegan diet. My problem is with the practicability of this. You can imagine in a situation like the one I've just described, how it can be difficult even to make sure you're getting the right amount of calories, let alone making sure that you're on top of your macro and your micronutrient balance.
If you're eating as a vegan, obviously you're going to run into problems because while you're sitting there pretending like the vegan diet is as nutritious as people told you that it is, but not as you've actually ever had demonstrated to you, you act like you didn't have the option of just simply not eating plants. This is not a foreign concept. It is not a new concept. There have ever been times when people have been forced to only subsist on animal products, so much so that the small amount of plants that they may have had are negligible, and yet they didn't experience deficiencies. It's been demonstrated time and time again that not only does eating vegan cause health issues, it also causes deficiencies. That is why there are so many warnings. That is why you have to jump through so many hoops in order to prevent yourself from becoming deficient. This whole, I tried supplements, but the supplements didn't work for me, but they should definitely work for you mentality is insane. Somebody somewhere supposedly did some research that they got other people to double down on, and this is just supposed to make things be the case in life. So when people actually try to do it and it doesn't work, we just blame ourselves as though whatever quote-unquote research whoever did or used at some point maybe continues to stand, even though we can't reproduce what they say should be the case. It reminds me of the whole, oh my God, if you're a carnivore, you're going to get scurvy. It was a legitimate concern because we have some information that could reasonably lead us to that conclusion. But when you actually take carnivore populations and see how they're doing and they don't have scurvy, that's how you learn. Then it becomes, oh, wait a minute, there's more to it than we thought. And then you do more research, you apply more science or whatever, and you update your understanding. And now we understand why. Remember, science doesn't give us capital T truths. Vegans tend to forget that when it's convenient for them. I really want to stress that there is the option of just simply not eating plants. We will get back to this later.
But because of the fact that it is easier to get the nutrients that are required to be healthy on a non-vegan diet, which, say what you like about it being easy to live healthily as a vegan, which I believe in many cases it can be and is, it is easier to not be one.
Now, why the fuck would that be? Do you want to talk about bioavailability? Do you want to talk about the amount of plants you would need to eat in order to match the same nutrition that you would get in relatively small amounts of meat and organs? And it still wouldn't be enough? Do you want to talk about the supplements? And why would animal products be more bioavailable to a human? And why does this not matter? From what I understand, One of the ways we determine whether or not something is bioavailable is if the package it comes in is digestible. So, if most of the foods on the vegan diet are indigestible, can you use some common sense as to why some people would be having trouble meeting their needs? Oh, of course it doesn't mean it's impossible. Just suffer at all. Just suffer at all to get it. And then there's the added problem of them being toxic, and therefore the cause of negative problems in the body. Meat, fat, marrow, organs, these are all perfectly digestible. There isn't anything lacking. There isn't anything inherently toxic, although just like with water, you can experience toxicity if you overconsume particular macro and micronutrients. It should literally be smooth sailing. And you're still sitting there making excuses for the foods that you were eating in the past as well. And then you continue to eat them on the vegan diet and they continued making you sick. Just work with me for a second here. The problem could be A, animal products, B, plants, C, a combination of the two, D, your body, or other problems we may not be able to do much about. For privileged people such as ourselves, our diet is something we can easily construct ourselves. In the past, you did C and had problems. More recently, you cut out A and only ate B, and the problems got worse. Now, I have to admit I was very similar, except I never cut out the most healthful foods completely, but I tried to have a balanced diet and things got worse. I can admit my own folly. Last year, I tried to cut out B and only eat A, and all the problems either went away or have been greatly reduced. Like Alex, or at least I'm assuming this is the case, I blame myself. Vegetables are so good for you, they said. Vegetables are so healthy, they said. And I blamed and berated myself and hated myself and my stomach too because I thought it couldn't do its job properly. At least in my case, I didn't really need to change anything else. I can still stand to make some improvements in my life, but at least I'm not in constant pain and terror trapped in the body that's constantly holding me hostage because of the way that I was abusing it.
I found that in practice, despite obviously having a lot invested in this, I wasn't able to make it work. And so I ended up experiencing a lot of the typical symptoms that you hear in these kinds of videos. So these are the typical things that you hear about. I was experiencing fatigue, but at the same time as insomnia. I just wasn't sleeping properly. I was experiencing brain fog. I was unable to properly focus. I was feeling physically weak. But I was also experiencing other commonly reported symptoms. I was having, a lot of bloating and a lot of gas, like a lot of gas. I was experiencing joint pain. I was experiencing all kinds of things that I found it very difficult to know what was being caused by my diet.
It would be nice if you gave us some insight into what else could have possibly been affecting you other than the change in your eating habits. You sit here and you tell us it's all the common symptoms you hear about in very similar videos of people saying that they have to give up veganism. Yet you cannot put two and two together. You magically expect us to not be able to put two and two together. What does skepticism mean to you? Denial? Since I don't follow this guy around, nor do I know everything that he does, there's a chance that he did try an all-meat diet and didn't work for him. But that would be really good to know here. He already alluded to the fact that he had to reincorporate non-vegan items. How much of a difference would it make to admit that you tried an all-meat diet?
And crucially, as I say, this isn't something that's caused by veganism. It's not caused by a vegan diet. It would have been caused, if it was caused by my diet, by the way that I was doing this vegan diet. But also there's something that I don't want to mention it, but I want to mention it in this context, which is that there have been various things that have happened in my personal life that at points have led to something of a mental health crisis. I don't really know what to say here because I'm sorry, but I'm just not going to give you the details about that. I haven't given the details about that to my closest friends and family, so I'm certainly not going to talk about it on camera in detail, except for the fact that I've been experiencing something like it.
So he vaguely alludes to the fact that these mental health problems could have been the cause for the declining health that he experienced, the symptoms of which are very similar to those of other people who tried the vegan diet. There's emerging science linking poor gut health to mental health problems. And what causes poor gut health? At least in my case, not meat, not animal fat, not eggs, not seafood, and not dairy, when I only consume these foods with basic seasonings. This being an anecdote notwithstanding, I noticed a marked difference between my mental health, my ability to deal with stress, my mood when I don't consume sugar for an extended period of time. When I add sugar back in, over the next day or so, those problems return. When I stop consuming sugar, those problems go away. If we're talking about this on an individual basis, we're talking about something that you can try to do for yourself that can help improve something for you in your life. And yes, that individual experience is an anecdote, but it doesn't mean that it's not real for you or that it's not impactful for you. I don't think it's a secret or a stretch of the imagination that sugar does things like cause hypersensitivity and weird addictions and things in people, and that can affect people's moods. Can you please explain to me what micronutrient you're supposed to be subsisting off of on a vegan diet if you're not eating animal protein or fat? Because if it's carbs, why the hell are you still so insistent that the vegan diet is a viable thing for people who want to thrive? What the hell does health mean to vegans, honestly?
What I'm trying to do instead is get across the point that when I'm talking about the practicability of living a healthy plant-based diet, I'm not talking about the idea that a plant-based diet isn't or can't be healthy. What I'm trying to get across is that even if in principle it can be healthy and it's perfectly possible to be healthy on a plant-based diet, for various practical reasons, that might be something that's unattainable.
But just for you, though, magically. And then for the rest of the 8 billion people on the planet, we can suffer, we can be malnourished, we can be in a state of ever-declining physical and mental health.
And to not recognize that, I think, is a mistake, and I think it's going to do harm. And on that point, I should talk about some of the reactions that I've received just from the statement that I put out. I mean, there have been some responses that have been perfectly fine, disappointed or trying to understand or whatever. But I mean, you don't need me to tell you that there's been a great deal of hatred and vitriol. You can see it for yourself. Of course, what you can't see is the things that people are messaging me privately. Maybe I can show some examples on the screen. It's been relentless, and sometimes from from quite established figures, blue tick vegan advocates sending me messages saying that I'm, quote, fucking retarded. As well as I saw that vegan teacher said that if we were living in a time where it was still legal, she'd be calling for my public hanging. You'll forgive me if I'm not going to give you the details, certainly not of my mental health experiences, when I know that there are people out there who are just waiting to essentially make content out of this. I've already seen people just making all kinds of videos and memes.
You say you have a thick skin, but this is one of those show don't tell kind of situations, because a lot of what I had to cut out of this video was him rambling about things emotionally and in ways that show that he's not necessarily dealing with things in a way that I would expect somebody with a thick skin to be dealing with them. On one hand, I can't help but sympathize because unlike what most vegans think, I'm not a monster who can't feel or sympathize with other living beings. On the other, it's like, for the love of donkey balls, please stop whinging and making excuses and pandering. I tend to ramble myself, but I feel this video could have been 5 minutes tops.
The thing that I want people to be careful of here is how is this going to look to other people? I still want to encourage people to try veganism. I still want to encourage people to join the movement against animal suffering, against factory farming. But imagine somebody's on the fence about becoming a vegan. They're not really sure whether it's going to be for them or not. And then they see what's happened here. Right? They see somebody who says, look, this wasn't working for me for various reasons, and I need to let you know about that. And seeing this kind of response, seeing this kind of this hatred and unforgiving vitriol, what is that person going to think? They're going to think, I obviously don't want a part of this, because is that going to be me if I then end up changing my mind? I understand the anger, I understand the disappointment, but believe me, it's not a good look.
I'm not the kind of person who believes that being part of a particular community immediately equals guilt by association, but insert something about being careful about the company you keep, something about a wolf in sheep's clothing, something about toxic religiosity, something about being so dogmatic about something that you become short-sighted, fanatical, irrational, and irresponsible, and misanthropic, and yet still keep trying to get people to fall down that hole while you're trying to climb out. Miserable snake.
So of course there are still going to be people who think that this is inadequate. If that's because I haven't really gone into any philosophy, I guess I've decided that it's best to separate out these two things, because I don't want it to seem like I'm trying to make some case against veganism, or that I'm trying to just rationalize the problems that I've been having.
Does anybody else find this incredibly confusing? I thought the whole point behind being vegan and pushing veganism onto others was philosophy. What exactly is scientific about dictating a diet to yourself based on ideology? It's all emotional drivel from the start. So you're more than happy to throw philosophical arguments in people's faces to try to get them to poison themselves or to try to get them to malnourish themselves. You found out, oh, this is not the way I want to live, but you can admit that because of your ideology, you made yourself sicker. You can acknowledge that because of your ideology, you possibly fell short of even trying a third option, which is to simply not eat plants. And because of how toxic and destructive this religion is, you're sitting here acting defeated, unable to criticize anything about the ideology except for the bad actors, even in the face of so much evidence of the diet itself harming you. All of a sudden, philosophy doesn't matter? Imagine me trying to get away with this shit. Vegans these days especially are so militant. They'll try to talk you out of your own life experiences because of words on paper. And here he is trying to get away with that. This is why I find it hard to allow the sympathy that I feel for him to matter to me. I don't even feel like calling him names anymore.
One thing that I said at the end of the statement that I put out was that I was sorry, especially to people who'd become vegan activists or advocates on my account. And a lot of people misunderstood that. I'm not sorry that I've turned people vegan. I'm not sorry that I've made people advocate for this cause. I'm just trying to say that I'm sorry to them for the disappointment that they might and do feel because of what I'm doing here. I'm not sorry that they've become vegan activists. So I do, of course, still want to see the end of factory farming, and I hope that vegans don't see me as their enemy on this front. Like I'm hoping we can still work together in our advocacy here.
He's asking for the same kind of sympathy that people on the other side ask for, because we're also not happy with the factory farming situation, and we're also not happy with the fact that animals are being mistreated. We're just not dumb enough to not eat foods that are appropriate for our species type. It's not about wanting animals to die. It's about us not wanting to starve. It's about understanding that death is a necessary part of the cycle of life on planet Earth and living life accordingly. Where the hell is the sympathy for the other side?
But as I say, I understand the reactions that I've been receiving, and I find it difficult to predict how those reactions will evolve or change based on this video, but thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I didn't really know how to begin the video. I don't really know how to end it. I can only say thanks for listening. Thanks for at least trying to understand. And yeah, hopefully now we can get back to producing regular, interesting content that if you still stick with me in this channel, you'll continue to enjoy. And yeah, I guess I'll see you in the next one.
Are you a vegan? Did he appease you? Do you feel even more confident in your vegan way of eating now? I'm not sure who can listen to that, especially if they're suffering the same symptoms and think, I can make this work. It is so bizarrely ass backwards and abusive. I don't really know what else to say. Like, if you're a battered woman and you're trying to convince another battered woman to stay with her husband, but you decide to leave your husband because you can't take the abuse anymore, but you keep telling her that she's strong enough to withstand it, even though the likelihood that she's not is super high. And all for what? Some weird pretense that marriages hold societies together and she should just hang in there because won't somebody please think of the children? It seems so fundamentally wrong to me, but who am I to judge? Anywho, thank you so much for watching, and as always, be having a good day.